is that this is a process that is adopting how we do what we do with our neural network, which is located between our two ears and behind our eyes. That neural network does just that. It identifies 12 million or so bits of data per second and uses those 12 million bits per seconds of data to say, about 30 some thousand decisions a day. Lots of decisions making, lots of identifying, and in between you have some labeling. And some labeling is not as simple as it sounds, because those labeling has some weights behind it. They have biases behind them, and they have about thousands and thousands of different ways of labeling, depending on what language you speak, depending on what temperature, what culture, and what part of the world you live in. Those labeling will change, right?
Right.
And they're not forced, they're just natural. Those labels, weights, and bias happens naturally, but we have some control over how to practice it frequently. And without going much into it, my point being is that we identify, we label, and we make decisions. That's what we do 100% of our lives. As long as you're conscious, not knocked out cold, you are always identifying, you're continuously labeling, you're continuously making decisions. So these AI capabilities that we're talking about, what makes it not something so fearful is to look at it from that perspective, right? Say, well, if I have to spend time in identifying, labeling, and make decisions, why can't I let a system that I trust and believe and I've verified it, trust but verified, right? Why can't I have that? If I do, what will it do to my lifestyle that I have right now? How would that take my 16 hours of being awake and turn that 16 hours to be a fruitful one, right? So there's plenty of ways to look at it. And I appreciate that fact that identifying, labeling, and decision making is core component of machine learning, just like it is for our brain. And if we allow a machine to practice how we make decisions, and it makes those decisions for us with high accuracy and most confidence, let it go that way. I think Shakespeare said it: if you don't have to memorize it, just write it down.
Right.
That's okay. That's how brain should be. Brain should have more time for creative activities to explore things and be curious, right? Whatever brings confusion in our life should be met with curiosity. And that curiosity, if it doesn't lead to an answer, well, keep asking questions. You will get there sooner or later. So there's a whole lot of questioning we're doing right now, and this is part of our journey, is to ask those right questions.
So I think what a lot of people kind of need, especially if you're trying to say, how do I get to an end state where I'm helping people with Alzheimer's? But I think it's like you pointed out, what is available, what's out there. So you got closed AI, right? That's you and I have a company, and we built our own AI. You can buy that from us. It's not publicly available. Then you have open AI, kind of with ChatGPT. We're all using it. We're all throwing data in there, and it's kind of learning from all of us. And that could be good or bad, right? It's going to get good stuff. It's going to get bad stuff. So I don't know what the outcome will be, because it depends on who you got contributing. Then you got open source, where you're kind of partnering with different code writers, right? So I think it's when you're building your team to kind of solve a problem this big, what do I need? I may go with a company like COOPVA and say, hey, you guys are going to build me a closed AI specifically for this. Well, that for you, hopefully you got the team to handle all those perspectives and aspects. Open AI is like Wikipedia, right? There's going to be some good stuff in there, some great facts, but there may be some stuff you got to get out. And can you completely trust it? And I think we're all dealing with trust. That's a huge thing. And then if we're talking about open source, then that can also be paid, or that can also be partnership. So it depends on who you have on the other side being that partner. But I think when you're tackling a problem that has so many, HIPAA violations, I think of ethics. I'm just going through the list of things you have to think about. But I look at something as simple as this. Memory. I saw a text to image service. I think it was DALL-E or something, and I watched somebody put their picture in there, and it made a bunch of avatars for them. And I'm thinking about somebody with Alzheimer's, you know, maybe, using a text to image to kind of, build their memories in there. Can you imagine telling a story and then maybe and having AI, regenerate that so you can see it to kind of help your memory? And imagine putting somebody's, because my grandmother has like a whole bunch of photo albums. So imagine taking all those photo albums, putting them into like a program like that. And so not only can I recall, I might actually be able to see real pictures of myself. And maybe the AI regenerates what that might have looked like. When you kind of look at GAN's type of AI, or where it's kind of trying to replicate reality over and over again, you might be able to build that. Building somebody a world where maybe, like you said, their memories are written down. How do you take that Shakespeare analogy and make it real life? So AI has the ability to, maybe if I took all the pictures, but think about taking all your pictures on Facebook, and like you and I are both in the military, we can't, we're having trouble recalling our service. Well, there's enough images out there that can recreate that experience. And maybe I go there, and that's how I preserve my memories, is to go maybe relive that experience, or as I'm telling that story and trying to recall as an Alzheimer patient, that comes back up, right? And you know how sometimes we get errors confused. Like sometimes you see a person living with Alzheimer's confuse errors. What if the AI is able to kind of put that back in perspective for you, to kind of help you realign your thoughts? So I think when we think about the possibilities, that's the one thing that we have to have, the thing that the human brings to the table, the creativity, right? That creativity to imagine what could be versus what the tools could do. So when you kind of look at what could we do for these patients, what could we dream up? I think that's where human creativity mixed with AI and machine learning can actually end up giving something beautiful back to people. Or even think about beyond Alzheimer's. How many times, I think I was watching something where it was filmed in 1944, where they had two former slaves. They were 102, and they were telling stories about living back there. Now that's just left up to our imagination. But imagine if they had AI and machine learning, it can actually take you back there. Think about an elder telling you a story about the past, a place we couldn't have lived in, but trying to explain what that was like. And there's enough imagery out there where the AI can maybe build these worlds where you can imagine my grandmother saying, I grew up in the South on this type of street and it looked like this. Well, AI now, you think about pictures in 2014, how pixelated they were, to how they look today, right? Are you talking about, like, I think OLED rolled out a 16K TV. So we're in the era where the AI is getting so good that it can recreate these crisp images of time, where even if an elder was telling a story of the past, we can get an accurate depiction. That wasn't available before, right? Somebody telling a story. We have to wait for a movie, but we know movies like to embellish. But what if your loved one's telling the story? It would be nice to be able to preserve those things, see them, maybe explore, just to kind of, that lived experience. And think about PTSD, right? Think about a doctor being able to see what you witnessed, and being able to kind of, say, what is it that you saw? Well, I went through this. And that doctor being able to see, get that mental image of what you witnessed and how you felt in that moment. How would that help be able to guide a patient maybe back to a better state of mind? You might not ever get over the trauma, but you can get to maybe a better place. But I think the applications of AI and machine learning, if the human creativity is there without that fear, right, could lead to some great things.
Yeah, the spectrum is so broad, right? Just to say, like, okay, look at the full spectrum and say where it is that we want to get started. Where do we start with the elephant, right? How do we draw that first pixel in order to say we can draw a full image now, right? That's I will pause here and go back to what I referred earlier to, because I want to say it again, but re-emphasize it in different ways. What I was wondering is that, like, how fast is AI solutions are coming to market, and how fast they're coming in, and how thoughtful are they in order to provide that solution, right? Are they just coming in because they are able to provide that solution? But here's the great part about coming up with that fast solutions really, really fast. It is just that fast because the capability that we have been developing for AI machine learning for 10, 20 some years now at this point, and all this available access of data, available points of like platforms and capabilities of like, APIs and abilities to say code really, really fast, right? When it's not thoughtful, but at least it gives you a glimpse into how fast this technology, everything that you just mentioned, all the things within the spectrum, how fast can they be turned into an actual reality where it's being delivered, right? Delivered for not just you to use it, to demo it, but from demo to productionalizing it, to have it in front of the paid customer's hand is less than a few months. And that is unheard of in
Right.
software development. That is unheard of in many of the technology adoption. So when it comes to AI machine learning, I want to point that out very clearly because that's what's happening and that's what should get people on the excitement balcony, right? Everybody's looking at this AI from a balcony should be able to say like, wow, that will move really, really fast. You just have to have an idea and move that idea really, really fast because all the things you need for your idea to come to reality, as in a production, as in a product or deployed to an environment, it will come out very fast. And one of the reasons we are having this discussion is to say, like, okay, we want to add more thoughts to this. We want to gather more feedback. We want to get more comments out of this conversation. Because if we do, not only are we being thoughtful in our fast tracking of product development, as in we could have had this done a few months ago,
Right.
but we've been sitting on it to say like, okay, let's gather a massive amount of requirements. Let's go through that requirements and say which one do we pick and how do we create an agile framework to pick features every few days and then build on those features and have those features available and ready when we have to combine it with another product or another tool, right? Because you mentioned that PTSD could be one of the solutions. If you're working on Alzheimer's dementia, it could be a solution for somebody to be able to view historical information, not just on audio, but as you're hearing the audio, you can see the video that goes with it. And that video takes instantaneous click of a button for it to become a reality, right? And it's happening with AR, augmented reality, VR, virtual reality, and then MR, which is the mixed reality. So these AR, VR are not a far off concept. This AR is coming out in January 2024 from
Right.
Microsoft. Excuse me, wrong company, Apple.
Apple.
Microsoft has had AR for a while, but not the one that you're going to go out and buy because it's not that crazy of a product. But what's coming out in January 2024 will definitely set the course for what we will have as far as replacement of iPhone. So iPhone's existence is no longer relevant. And I just want to put one more thing into that because the reason I'm talking about AR, VRs, and all these goggles and phones is because what you see as a software today, the fast tracking of the software, only thing that's slowing it down is the hardware. And the hardwares that we're looking into saying, we cannot sustain the hardwares we have today. The hardwares that are coming down the pipeline in the future is definitely already here. It's just that it needs to for the wide adoption of it, right? So everything you mentioned is software based. What's holding it back is the hardware. The wide adoption of it, the way you are envisioning it today, why the future is not here today, is because of those hardware pieces. And these hardware pieces are right around the corner. It is being developed really, really fast. And we can go into semiconductor chips. We can talk about tools and hardwares, how to build them. But that's not what this presentation is about. This presentation is specifically about the software. But if you think about everything you just said, only thing that's holding it back is the hardware. And I think those hardwares are around the corner. They're coming.
So I agree with you. I think they are. But I think what any company team kind of has to think through, right? These are cascading and laddering. Well, we're talking about OKR. So you probably need objectives and key results going on at all levels of your company or your organization right now to get this done right. So I think what you're talking about is every team needs some objectives, right? You need some vision, need a good mission, but then you need some objectives with key results. And I think the reason why that's important is, especially when we're talking about AI, you see all this coming fast, right? Faster than we've ever seen before. But what's your sphere of influence, right? Instead of being afraid of the AI, are you at the governance level where let's talk about policy, let's talk about ethics, how we as a company are going to do this. So you need people, if your sphere of influence is governance, then how are you gathering those teams together? The second one is architecture, right? This the second level of influence. So that's that person, like, who's looking at the hardware, the knowledge management, the type of skill sets do we need? I need a data analysis now. I need a data scientist. I need people who know how to ideate. So when you're talking about the architecture, is putting that in your company. Then you got people that's working on the strategy. Where are we trying to go? Who's building those roadmaps? Who's looking at the current needs assessment? Looking at going from how do we get from that current state to that future state? Who's building those roadmaps? And then last but not least, sustainability. So once we build this, how do we keep it going? How do we not high five? Because the problem with AI, not the problem, but the challenge with AI and machine learning is not high fiving after you've reached something. This is an ever growing field. So you have to be able to shift and grow as it shifts and grows. And then kind of relooking at your governance, your architecture, and your strategy over and over again. Those folks in that sustainability sphere of influence, they're looking at money, they're looking at people and process in a constant motion. So I think that we kind of have to get out of this mode that we can do change incrementally and kind of get into this this mode where we can do change on the go. Like, as a learning organization, I think it was Lewin's model that said you have to unfreeze, learn, and refreeze. I think that's dead in this era that we're in. I think everybody has to unfreeze, learn, and flow. We're now a river, right? We're not Antarctica anymore, where we're trying to get back to that frozen state. We are the mighty Mississippi. And I think that's great, right? 30% of U.S. goods go through the Mississippi River. So it's okay to be a moving river, because that gets things done too. I think this idea that we have to refreeze in place kind of has to go away as the machines and AI and smart cities and all these things we're talking about. Because I was actually sitting here thinking about, again, the human creativity. You have lampposts that are going to be able to read health. Check out your health. You got this AI machine learning. You got smart watches right now. So if I'm a person with Alzheimer's and I get lost and maybe I'm having a moment, how come that person couldn't maybe push a button on their phone, and then, all these smart cities combined with their smart watch can help them get home or alert a family member that they're having a episode, right? So when we talk about services that might be available in a smart city, which is, all this AI machine learning working together, and you talking about that neural network, how do we get that neural network, this AI machine learning, to work like our brains do, right? They're all talking together. But I think it all starts with that governance. Once you have that foundation in place, like any house, when I got the governance, the architecture, the strategy, and the sustainability plan in place, then I can build on top of that house. But I have to consistently be flowing. And I think that's what we have to get comfortable in. I'm uncomfortable right now. I can admit that, as much as we're all talking, I think right now I got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So when we're talking about dealing with uncertainty, and we're talking about sense making, that you and I, the era we're kind of ushering in, is we're in an era of constant change, and that's okay. I think we kind of have to get used to, especially if you're trying to solve problems like, how do I help a person with Alzheimer's? Big problems need big solutions. And when we kind of look at the overall dream of, here's where we want to be at the end, and that dream may have 10 points, but going back, you got to only get to point 1 first, right? I don't have to get all 10 at first, but I got to get to point 1. So that constant flow with cascading and laddering objectives throughout the team, I think, is what gets us there. The one thing, and you can tell it's on the mind of I took a Measure What Matters course, so it's on my mind. But when I sit here and I think about it, what really hit home with some of the things they were saying is BAU, business as usual. We kind of want to bring in AI and machine learning to help us do business as usual. instead of being creative and saying, what's next? What's amazing? And I think if we get to amazing, some of the stuff we're talking about, not only will we maybe be able to, we're not on the side of curing Alzheimer's, but imagine being able to live with it enough to continue functioning, like improving your quality of life. I think that AI is not the cure, right? They're not the doctors on the other side. That's a different type of creativity. But imagine somebody who's maybe not at the later stage of Alzheimer's being able to kind of sit for a moment, get their memories back in order, and then continue going on. I firmly believe that AI and machine learning can help with that. But you need people on that side, that end user. So if we're talking about user experience, that end user are Alzheimer patients. It really takes us as practitioners thinking through the governance, the architecture, the strategy, and the sustainability. Once we have that down, and then you know your place, everybody doesn't have to be the AI expert. Sometimes you're the person that's like, I want to figure out how to sustain it. I want to figure out the governance. So once you find out your sphere of influence, don't work in a silo. You have to work as a team. This is a team effort. How we get to these outcomes that could be amazing for folks.
So we covered a whole lot of learning, and I think that for the last piece of this presentation, I'm going to walk through what our chain of thought is, why it is that we're so excited about developing this tool, and we'll definitely get into the knowledge management. I think the core of this conversation is knowledge management, right? And this Remind Me tool is no different, right? But all the capabilities that we will discuss, it already exists. It's not that far off. It's just that we're tweaking it for individual purposes and needs. Some user experiences requires that user don't even know they're experiencing it, as in it's seamless. It has very little amount of involvement in their part, right? When things are happening for good, which, by the way, that's the key word, it's happening for good, and they opt into it. That good is happening after they opt in seamlessly and happening without their daily lives being interrupted, right? So with that in mind, I can go through some of the topics here, but like as you're listening, as you're thinking about Alzheimer's dementia, and some topics that we haven't covered in this discussion, and you're thinking about it, but we didn't mention it, that means we're not even thinking about it, right? And we would like to hear that from you. We would like to hear that however you can present it. Put this in the comment, or send us inbox it to me and Oshan, or just flat out reach out on LinkedIn and just put out a post, say, hey, we really enjoyed this conversation, and these are some of my thoughts, and these are some of the feedbacks that I'll provide as part of what I've just listened to, right? So in healthcare specifically, AI machine learning is a giant part of the discussion, because like way it's going, it's not just about, let's technology. No, it's a shrinking workforce. The amount of people available to work in the healthcare space is shrinking. And how do we have assistants that are AI machine learning based, or augmentation that are AI machine learning based for the people that are in healthcare, the doctors, the nurses, the technicians? How do we help them to do more with very little? And how do we do that without stressing out the people in the mix, right? So that process have to be seamless. Like I said, the technicians shouldn't have to be worried about what a machine is doing, and keep that as part of their stress list, right? What's stressing you out today? Well, my AI is not really doing what it's supposed to, right? We don't want those stress to be added. We just want to reduce the stress. So Alzheimer's dementia, this presentations that I'm clicking on right now, if you're listening in, is that the brain, starts losing its size, right? The cortex started to shrink. Things that are not supposed to happen in your brain for you to function properly starts happening to your brain. And that's sort of like, if the brain is a muscle, the muscle shrinkages is okay if you're an elderly person. But when your brain started shrinking dramatically, it causes your memory losses. It causes all sorts of problems. And this Remind Me solution is not a solution to prevent the Alzheimer. is to augment and assist a person to live a better life, even with Alzheimer. If not, help the patient care or the caretakers that are involved in the Alzheimer dementia patients' lives, to give them a little bit more assistance in doing their daily chores, right? Family members, it is very emotional, not just for the patient, but the family members also, right? Emotional stress of saying, this loved one of mine used to know me by name, used to know me because we're very close, and here we are, like this person is not able to recognize me anymore. How do we help with that? So there's lots of things that are happening inside the brain, and we can help and assist any way or form or shape. We are willing to do that research and figure out the solution and hopefully have it implemented, right? So this Alzheimer dementia situation, as we engage with the subject matter experts, one thing we come to the same conclusion with each subject matter expert is that this is not decreasing in numbers. This Alzheimer dementia situation is only increasing in numbers. More and more people are experiencing it, living in the digital world that we live in. The digital part of it could only be an augment or assistive tool in somebody who's experiencing Alzheimer dementia. And more people in this country will experience Alzheimer dementia come next 20 years. And that could be a huge burden within our healthcare system. So when I mentioned that we want to help the healthcare professionals with their day-to-day tasks in their job, well, we have to figure out ways to not only support them today, but support them when there isn't that many healthcare professionals out there available to work, because our workforce is shrinking, and it's just not shrinking in healthcare, it's shrinking overall in the workforce. So proposed solution is to have a machine learning solution that will help to identify and label and help the patient to make a decision. So it's sort of like, working off of a cue. And that's what happens with the Alzheimer dementia patients, that they see the cue that's happening in front of their eyesight, and they take the cue and follow the same, because they realize, aha, this is time to eat, right? So one of the things that you might not realize is that the Alzheimer dementia patients loses a lot of weight because they are no longer are able to keep their focus, the chain of thought, and then have the reality orientation to say, now it's time to eat, right? So instead of eating actual meal, they will end up snacking. And when they end up snacking, they end up losing lots of weight because they haven't had a meal for days, right? Because that's a very early stage of Alzheimer dementia where people are forgetting tasks that they are so used to doing for all their lives. All of a sudden, they start forgetting those things, and their memory starts receding, right? So we want to help with those pieces. So earlier I mentioned about the family members. We talked about some of the visual cues and object or reality orientation, right? The reality orientation is how we are able to help them with their chain of thoughts and say, this is the task that you have identified that you have to get done, and this is how you label it, and this is how you make those decisions, and keep them in those chain of thoughts continuously, and have them complete the task that they need to complete. And these are not just to help the patient to do what they have to do in order to feed themselves or have a meal that they probably will need somebody's assistance with. But let's say it's just not the case all the time. So some of the times it's about the medicine. Some of the time it is about self-care, right? How do we help the person to do a better self-care so that way, the caregivers are not exhausted by taking care of 5 different dementia patients all at once, right? There's some help involved within those human in the loop, right? So there's a lot to talk about, but I'm going kind of fast because I want to get to the point of knowledge management, right? This knowledge management is crucial. I think Oshan mentioned earlier about PTSD. Oshan mentioned about 3D holographs, the capability of visualizing things as the audio is coming on. These are knowledge management baseline. If we're able to engage with knowledge management the way we have it today and transfer it through a digital transformation and turn it into an intelligent knowledge management, there's a whole lot we can get done with those intelligent knowledge management. And this solution is one of the piece of intelligent knowledge management. This is what we want to specialize in COOPVA. We want to be able to advise you on this knowledge management for your archive data sets, records, your record management. How do you utilize what you already have in your inventory, in your portfolio, and convert that into an AI solution that will be faster and easier to achieve, sort of like the lowest hanging fruit, but work your way up to the top of the tree with other AI solutions based off of this knowledge management. And this knowledge management includes large language models. It could include so many computer visions. It could include OCRs. List goes on. But ultimately, what it comes down to is that if you engage the knowledge management as a good starting point for all of your use cases. So benefits and features, like we talked about earlier, reality orientation, right? We want to increase the independence of a person, right? And personalize the support. So that way it's not for all Alzheimer patient, it is for person A or person B, right? It's tailored to each individual needs, which if you think about it, software and coding and programming language could never achieve in a personalized level. It is only possible by AI machine learning, because AI machine learning has proven itself to be a great tool when it comes to variables and making decisions based on those variables. Some of the features that we will talk about is that, like I said, user-friendly interface, right? When it comes to user-friendly interface, do we even have to have the hardware in front of the person? Because the Alzheimer dementia patients are known for not utilizing hardwares. They really don't care about what they hold in their hands anymore. So when you think about phones, we cannot provide that solution through a phone. This is not possible through a hardware that they will have to carry with them. It has to be built into the IoT device around them. And one good thing about Alzheimer dementia patients is that they like to live in a very small space. They don't like to spend a lot of times in a big homes. They like to spend time in an enclosed space. And that means we will have ability to access speakers, some visual cues using the light bulbs or the fridge, right? So all sorts of IoT devices can come together and create a seamless experience for a person who would not need to have a hardware in their hand or somewhere in their body or in their ears, right? So we can create a reminder tools and provide visual cues and audio cues for a person to follow through with any sort of daily activities that they have to follow through with. If you would like more information on this topic and get some brochure from us, please feel free to reach out and let us know. That way we can get you this brochure. If not, we'll get you a contact information for us to sit down one-on-one and discuss this topic with you. Like I said, we can discuss full spectrum of knowledge management, and we can start the discussion with Alzheimer's dementia. And that's important because earlier in this conversation, we mentioned that we're having discussions, and that's what it's about. Because we want to have people in the process involved. Technology will come once the right people gets involved and we adopt the right process. So our question to you is, what part of the process do we need to adopt? That's our conclusion piece of here is that we want your feedback. We want your comments. We want to hear from your subject matter expertise, not on Alzheimer's dementia, but any subject matter expertise that you bring to the table. How can we hear your thoughts and hear your feedback and incorporate that into our demo, incorporate that into our prototype, and hopefully within the futures, we can put it together and scale it to a level that is productionalized. And once it's productionalized, how do we get it in front of the patients so that patients can start benefiting from these tools? So with that in mind, I'm going to stop right there. But, I have great many comments on this topic, but I want to hear everything Ocean has to say now, because I bet he has some questions now.
Not really as much questions as comments. So as I look at that rollout, I think it's smart to crowdsource this. But I think knowledge management. So, or if you're talking about the heart of business intelligence. Especially what you're trying to build here. I always talk about having an infrastructure in place. You have good ideas. I think about a lot of good ideas you may have had in 2018 that the technology doesn't exist. That comes back up in 2023. A good knowledge management system captured that in 2018. right? Or we can revisit it in 2023. So when I look at what you're trying to do here, and I look at what you're trying to offer, I think looking at the benefits under each objective would probably be one of the biggest things. So I would, one of the things that I would do is rewrite those objectives as dynamic outcomes. Does that make sense? We want to create the best experience for our, nurse practitioners. And then underneath that, give yourself some key results. How are you going to do it, right? So objectives should be what you need to do, but then, how you need to do it. And that kind of gives everybody within the organization. So when we talked about that laddering and cascading, I need to see myself and where I can help. So I think that's the only thing that I would do is underneath the objectives, put some key results, some things you want to get up there and make them more aspirational. And then I think that that gets the team. Because I think some of these things, like we said, we don't want to talk over people's head. Are they think, well, I got to be a coder or a machine learning expert. But when you're thinking about talent management, right? Talent management has a role to play in what you just showed. Communications has a role to play in what you just showed. So I think when we talk about getting out of those silos, you have to write your objectives in a way where when I'm looking at a key result or something you're trying to, what you're trying to achieve with your objective, I can go, oh, that right there is me, right? You said you want to make the greatest experience, but I need this type of talent. That's what I can do for you. I don't have to solve the whole problem, but give me my piece of the puzzle to help you reach your overall mission. But I think it's a sound approach overall, just making sure those objectives are aspirational so everybody on the team can see where they fit in, from your executive assistants to your janitors. Everybody has something that they can contribute to your knowledge management.
Absolutely, because this knowledge management, like it's such a wide spectrum. The talent management piece of it is what probably should keep everybody awake at night, right? Because not only are you building a knowledge management for your employees to do more at work and do it better and faster without stressing themselves out, and have that retention go up, because now you're one of those companies that has knowledge management that is allowing the employees to engage with the knowledge management for the purposes of, say, taking time off, taking vacation, going on vacation, or coming back from vacation, getting paid, right? These knowledge management is such an integral part of company success in providing the employee with the experience similar to the user experience, employee with that experience to say, how do we make your life better, right? Can we do that? And once we do, what sort of investments do we make, and how do we get return out of those investments? And here's one of the things that I really like about talent management and knowledge management is that how do you have a person exit your organization and the next person that comes in, there is a seamless transition between the person who has exited and the new person who replaced them.
Right.
There's so many knowledge that is just left in the void, into the ether, that is not captured for the next person to say, well, seems like everything the last person has done is all saved right here, and I can actually have a chat GPT like conversation to say, like, what needs to be done? How can we finish this task that was started by the last person? And exit necessarily doesn't mean that the person left. He actually left with some experience that it was able to be captured within the system. That experience of saying, how does this person perform his job, his or her jobs on a daily basis, right? How can an AI learn from that? How can an AI teach the next person to say, well, if you're looking for that specific type of folder or type of messages, you have to go here, right? And it's all possible through chat GPT like system, or better yet, a voice AI. You're able to speak to a Jarvis. By the way, I know I'm talking future here, but that future is right around the corner. And I have no doubt about how many years it's going to take. It's probably going to be less than 5 years. We'll have voice AI incorporated into our world. But
that's Alexa really close to that. Sorry about that.
How close are we talking?
Well, I'm saying, well, Bixby and Alexa are so close to that, right? The only thing they don't do is interrupt you. And then when I say interrupt you, they're not conversational yet. But
they don't
literally say, Right. That's the only thing that's missing. So it's not, when you say it's closed, I'm like, it's practically, it's so close. It's practically here. Once it learns how to engage you, or you can turn that function on. Like, it seems like you could turn on conversation versus, voice prompting. So if you turned it on a conversation mode where it's in the room and invested in the conversation, because Alexa does that sometimes, right? You may say something is like, "Would you like me to play that?" You're like, "No, don't turn on my radio." So she's already listening, or Bixby, they're already listening. But if you turn on conversation mode where you include them, yeah, they'd be able to look up stuff in real time. That's so close to being a thing. Like that little paperclip that used to come up on Microsoft.
Maybe.
AI is almost at that point, right, where it's actually like, how can I assist you? I mean, think about when you go to a site. You go to a site that has a demo, right? That asks you for your phone number and asks, can it help you? So you already have a lot of AI that already engages you on pages when you go, when they, get your information, and then you end up getting a phone call from a human being that says, "Hey, we saw you downloaded our brochure." So the AI is helping to connect customers to the human. Once that human is interested in your product. But I think with KM, the other thing is comfortability, though. Asif, I think we talk about that a lot, but I think it's, what every company's struggling with right now is, how do I get somebody to bring their authentic professional self to work? Because what's going to fill your KM is those type of people. Because I think I hate when people say I got to be authentic at work. I got to bring my authentic self. One, everybody doesn't deserve your authentic self, because you're a dad. You and I are both dads. You're not going to get that part of me at the job, right? That's part of my authentic self. So when we kind of say that, I think we overstate what authentic self really means. Because also, if we had our authentic self on right now, we'd all have our pajamas on, blasting our music. You'd be like, "What are you doing?" It's like, I got my authentic self at work. You don't want that, right? We don't want to see all of that, right? But my authentic professional self, when I bring my knowledge to work, that goes from, you think about the Bulls, right? They've never replaced Michael Jordan. But I'm not trying to build the Bulls. I'm trying to build Dream Team 92, right? Where every single person on my team is a contributing superstar versus losing Michael Jordan. Because if I got a team of contributing superstars, we might lose Michael Jordan. That's a great piece, but I still have Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. Look, I'm dating myself, so for all the Generation Xers that know what I'm talking about. But but it's but if you're talking about putting together a dream team, that's the difference between having a band with a lead singer, or I have a group that consists of Taylor Swift, Usher, Cardi B, whoever, John Mayer. Like if that's all the artists I have, all of them, if I lose one, I'm better. I'm still good. Because I think with a lot of these ideas, you don't want to have just one person working. This is what we talk about, the siloed. I might bring that great idea, but I think we all should. I think Ray Diallo and Bridgewater still has one of the best approaches to work. The best idea wins. And I think if you're using your knowledge management to kind of create a superpower of business intelligence, where the best idea wins, you're never going to be stuck like you were talking about. If it's each one teaching a person, even if you're hiring. So you and I have different skill sets. But the cool thing about that is, if I was a hiring manager, Oshan and Asif are not a duplication. And as a company, I can learn from Asif, I can learn from Oshan, they can learn from each other, and we're going to be stronger because what you know and what I know complement each other. So a lot of times we're hiring redundancy over redundancy, right? I need an AI machine learning guy. I need an AI machine learning guy. Well, also you need a strategist. You need somebody who understands practical use, because a strategist doesn't always, they forget about people. You need a person who's people focused. So when you think about accessibility and 508 compliance. So when you're talking about HR or healthcare, right? Healthcare and government has a big 508 compliance and accessibility component to it, that somebody has to understand that type of policy and what that means and its impacts. So when you're talking about your knowledge management and having it organized, and the amount of people that you're going to need, it's a vast array of people bringing their professional, authentic self to work, to your learning organization. And so I got to be comfortable because people don't give good ideas to places and people they don't like. So worst scenario is having a smart person who's withholding ideas because they either feel you don't care or they're not a part of the team. So I think when you're talking about building these communities, a good KM community invites everybody to bring, their best. Like I always joke about this. It's been easier to tie my shoes because of that plastic cap on top of a shoe. But think about it. Somebody made the shoe. That's the big part of it. The shoelaces, the soles. But then somebody was like, if we put a plastic cap on these shoes, they'll be easier to get through the hole. So imagine if that person wasn't on the team, right? And it's seemingly insignificant, but it's such a huge deal, right? That somebody did that. It's such a simple thing that somebody's like, I just put a plastic cap on it and we can tie our shoes. And then somebody else was like, I'm sick of shoes at all. It's just Velcro them, right? And then Crocs came along and just got worse.
What did we do before that plastic? Because I'm not even what did we do? Oh, we just wrapped it around our feet, didn't we? Like we didn't even have holes to go put it through. It's just like it was just wrapped around your feet, right?
If you had excess shoelace, right, you wrap it around your feet, you wrap it around your ankle, or I mean, it's so many crazy things now that I think of back in the day that were solved by listening to one person on the team. That might be their only contribution, but that's great. It's such a huge contribution. So I think when we come together with KM, I think the bottom line of what you're trying to get through, especially when it comes to Alzheimer's, there's nobody. I think you have a group of intellectuals, right? Intellectuals have nothing to do with your degrees. It has everything to be, if you're a disruptive intellectual, it just means you have educated thoughts on a subject, educated opinions. So you could be somebody who just walked in off the street and can see the problem, or you could be somebody who's a doctor. And I think that when you're talking about knowledge management, and in this field, or what we're talking about, AI, machine learning, you're looking for disruptive intellectuals. And I love disruptive intellectuals because they're not afraid to take on the big problems. But having this foundational KM and what you're trying to build at COOPVA, I think is especially like what you're doing, crowdsourcing it here a little bit on LinkedIn and saying, hey, help me do it. I think that's the smart way to do things, because we're trying to, AI, the biggest thing to take away, AI is going to help humanity. So as humanity, working together to build better tools is exactly what we should do. This, you're talking about a closed source tool, but you're doing it. This is your version of open source building your tool. And I think that's smart to do, because there's so many smart people on LinkedIn, so many people that haven't been tapped into good ideas. And I'll say this, I've been being on LinkedIn. Asif has been, I met these people called the Gray Swan Guild. So, I had that book that came out called Uncertainty. And I had I kind of wrote something back in the military, and it kind of sat on my LinkedIn page for years. Like nobody was reading it until this group of people came along and said, you know what, this would help businesses and colleges and universities. So there's somebody on LinkedIn and, listening to this, you have a great idea and no one's been listening to you. You probably had it maybe during the pandemic, or maybe it sparked back in 2017. And this AI machine learning problem set that needs input from human beings, it needs a prompt engineer like yourself. If you're in the chat, you're like, you know what, I had a great idea, and maybe this is your opportunity. So I think LinkedIn is a great place where like-minded, smart people can come together, where the best idea can win, to help AI be an assist to humanity as it always was intended.
Well, how do we get part 2 of this conversation going immediately, right? Let's hold off for today because my goodness, like every time we conversate, it's just like always felt like, look, let's stop the conversation right now and start recording it, because it's just going out into the ether and nobody else is going to find out about it except for me and Ocean, right? So this has been a dream of mine to have you communicate all of our conversation in live stream, so that way everybody can listen in and everybody can join in, if not in person, but at least the comments, right? So this is one of my checklists. But other part of the checklist that I have is the nightmare of what happens if you have people and they are not interested, right? Quiet quitting, sitting there right in front of you, not giving you any ideas, not giving you any thoughts that improves your thought process, right? So that nightmare that you mentioned earlier, I just got to tell you, thank you for saying that. Thanks for bringing that up to the surface every time, because I'm seeing a whole lot of that. So everything you're talking about in LinkedIn, not being tapped in to their potentials, you're seeing that quiet quitting happening within LinkedIn until somebody brings it up to the surface on LinkedIn post, say, hey, I have this thing going on. Who wants to jump in? I do that continuously. I see something on LinkedIn and I engage right away. I'm like, oh my goodness, I love this. How can I learn more about that? Right. I might not do it in a comment section, but I'm definitely reaching out on the inbox. and people that are, I'm reaching out on inbox, and they're mostly are very surprised by the fact that it's not happening quite often that they're being reached out to about their ideas. And I appreciate the fact that you brought that up to the surface, because that quiet quitting mentality at work also impacts at home. But don't let it impact you at home, because when you come home, that's where you become creative, that's where you become innovative, and that's where you start putting those chips down, so that way you can build a better future, not just for yourself, but the people that you serve through your business, through your services and your organization, whatever the case is, right? Even through your volunteer work, right? I think that's very important to bring up to the surface. The knowledge management that we have today, it might fail us in organizational level, but it should not fail us in our personal level. As in, those knowledge management needs to be tapped in and always engaged with as a baseline of our daily life activities.
I wish that, for music people that, they got SoundCloud or TikTok or YouTube, and artists, they have, they can go to Instagram but I think for intellectuals, I think we need to start looking at LinkedIn. There's so many people who post blogs, or they put up their models or whatever. I think we have to do a better job scouring talent on LinkedIn. I'm one of those persons that kind of had their hand raised, and somebody did that for me. So I'm very open-minded doing that for somebody else. Like you come on here, you've been a leading mind for AI and machine learning, what, 7 years now? I mean, you're not new in this. So, I mean, when you had on the uniform, this is something that, kind of destined to do. So I hope more people kind of put on that hat, look at LinkedIn through the lens of, I'm looking for the next SoundCloud intellectual, right? Where's that person who has that model or that thing that we, that's missing, that we could, put into this idea and build a collective. Because I think they're out there, right? Like I said, I love a place like Grace Swan Guild. I always use them as an example. That's what they did, right? They kind of just, I met people from Africa. I met people from Canada. I met people from India that I never would have met if I wasn't on LinkedIn. I think about the pandemic. How many people did you talk to because they finally had to sit down for a second that you wouldn't have got to talk to before? So I think we can't lose that spirit when we're talking about this next set of problems. AI machine learning is the next great shift, and it's in our face. But now we need the group of intellectuals to make sure that we're finding the lost gems, those great ideas that you had, that maybe technology is the only thing that can enable it. Because you and I, that's what we talk about all the time. I'll have things in my head, but the technology didn't exist. And I used this example before. One of the best scenes in, since we were talking about Jarvis earlier, in Marvel movies is when, I think it's in Iron Man 2, when he can't get his heart fixed and his dad left him that video.
Mm.
And he said, the technology in my time does not exist to make this come to light.
That's right.
But his son lived in that technological time. Think how old that movie is, right? We live in even better technological times than Iron Man 2 did. So I think there's a lot of people who had great ideas, but they needed technology. Like, unfortunate ways have been used. If we remember Cambridge Analytica, we've seen when great ideas mixed with technology can be used for bad, right? So they took something that was in written word and mixed it with artificial intelligence, and then you got, the outputs that they came in. So there are definitely people who are not, don't have the ethics. We look in our politicians, right? We have people using text to imagery to besmirch their opponent, or they're using audio to say, hey, look, my opponent said this and they didn't. So we already see a lot of that happening for bad. So we need more disruptive intellectuals working on things like Alzheimer's instead of, maybe taking down my nearest politician or trying to scare the public. Or you saw what the Pentagon had to deal with, right? They had the fake image that they had them disturbed for a while where they thought it blew up. So again, disruptive intellectuals working together for the greater good. I think there's nothing that can stop us if we harness these SoundCloud intellectuals. I'm gonna start calling them that. I don't know. Hopefully, LinkedIn will come up with something, but we need SoundCloud intellectual page where, and there's probably a group. I'm pretty sure there's 100%. There's a group that's like drop your model, but we need to find a way to kind of have people like you, our CEOs, be able to discover folks like that, because, like I said, there's stuff we created in the military, right? The military said no. And then we got out of the military and companies were like, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. So some stuff's not a bad idea. It's just a bad idea in government, or it's a bad idea in the corporate world. It's good. You're just pitching your idea to the wrong group. So how do you get in front of the right group? So we're talking about that KM where you'll find value in it. Maybe my company doesn't, because that's not where we're at. So learning how to do those partnerships. And I'm a coin it right now. Find those SoundCloud intellectuals on LinkedIn to kind of lead us to the next thing. I'll say it for now till we find something better.
I couldn't have come up with something better because I'm thinking, but I'm not coming up with anything. So let's stick to the SoundCloud.
Well, how about this? Think Cloud, because we don't do music. We use thought. So maybe we'll call them Think Cloud intellectuals versus SoundCloud. So we'll do something distinction until we come up with something better. But then again, we crowdsource it. We'll look at the chat. If chat, you got something better, then you throw it in there, and then we'll discuss it, and that's what we'll call it. And we'll make up this group, and then go try to find these great ideas within LinkedIn to kind of bring them into the family.
There you go. Yeah, I think with that, we will wrap the show for now for this week. But there's definitely got to be a part 2 somewhere, part 3, part 4, until we get into the SoundCloud, until we get into that Think Cloud, right? Because that's where we're going to take this conversation into. But I think in an open forum like this, to have this discussion, asking for that crowdsourcing, asking for that open source information on what it is we're trying to develop. One other thing is to say, encourage anybody to say, look, this is the idea I have. If you can do it better, please do it. Because it's not about me. It's about the people who will need these type of services. Because if my capability reduces me to slow it down, that I'm not able to get in front of the customers and have those customers adopt to this technology so they can live a better life, I want you to do it. So there's no competition in these type of discussions. It's more of, does the other people does the same technology as I do, other people provide the same solution as I do. It's not a competition, it's the others, right? And the others does something better than I do, and I do something better than the others don't. Right. So before I get off this conversation, I just want to put that out there and say, like, it's about providing a service and solutions, right? So we are looking at the people, we're looking at the process, and whatever that process gives birth to, technology, solution, or services, whatever you want to call it, right? This idea that text to AI, text to coding, text to images, text to audio, text to video will have to encompass those capabilities and put them together in order to create solutions for people to live a better life with, have better augmentation, and live in a way that they feel assisted rather than lonely, right? And that's what's happening in this digital transformations that we're in right now. People are feeling more lonely than ever before, and that's insane. We are connected so very well, far beyond any time in history, yet we're so lonely in a world full of 7 billion people. That's unacceptable. So that's my challenge to anybody. Think of a new name for SoundCloud. intellectuals and come up with a solution better than this, what we're presenting right here. Thank you all.
Salute.